Hey everybody, Dustin Siggins here with Proven Media Solutions. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Cracking the Comms Code. With me, I have three people who are going to bring a really interesting set of perspectives, a really valuable set of perspectives for small agencies and consultancies that think it's all about getting the PR headlines or all about getting the great LinkedIn post or having the video go viral. When really, at the end of the day, half the job is making sure that the client feels comfortable, making sure that you show up to meetings on time, you send the proposal when you said you would, and your invoice has the right dollar amount with the right details for every client. And we're going to talk to Dan, who's been in corporate for a long time, Amanda, who's been at corporate and now is a consultant, and Susan, who, full disclosure, her company is a client of my company, but she works for a small company that is investing in their first ever PR process, and so a PR campaign. So we want to get these perspectives on what agencies and consultancies need to know about the boring back end that can make or break the relationship with the client. So if you all just introduce yourselves, Susan, Dan, and Amanda, and then we'll just kind of kick it off.
Susan Powell, Marketing Director for Interstate Moving, Relocation, and Logistics. And I have team members here for social media, for digital advertising, for graphic design, copywriting. But I'm sort of the great and powerful Oz of the marketing machine and understand through past experiences what PR means and what the role of PR is essential to do. With a small family-owned organization, we're 83 years old in a highly competitive marketplace. So I have that understanding. I needed to bring that understanding to bear for leadership. So, uh, like I said, I'm the customer perspective from a small family-owned company, but come from big corp as well, and have seen the life cycle of PR moving through campaigns and relationships within a number of different organizations.
Yeah.
Dan, I think you're up next.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm Dan Ring. I am a longtime comms person. Done the agency side, done the consulting side, done the in-house side for much of my career. I'm with a company that's rapidly growing in a very competitive space, fraud prevention, AML, etc. And we're global. Obviously, I've worked with lots of agencies over the years. And I did cut my chops on the agency side way back when we used telephones. So Amanda, over to you.
Yeah, I've had faxed once in my career, so I feel like I love it when we're like when something old is new again. My colleagues did troll me, and they were like, "1986 is calling." Like, Amanda, what are you doing? But I do think like connecting with people personally is like a big one of my core values. But I worked at big agencies, and then I worked in-house at eBay, PayPal, and Under Armour, mostly doing media relations. And then now I have my own company, and I work with some do PR for tech companies, AI companies, and then I one way that Dustin and I collaborate is a lot of the events, which are also content opportunities, like help comms people be better comms people, because the state of being a comms practitioner right now is you have three jobs. Your first job is you have to like manage internally because, if you're in-house or agency, that's like a core way of like when you have your annual review, it's how are you working with your internal stakeholders. But then the second job is understanding the media landscape, which has gotten crazier because you knew Joanna Sturman, she was at the Wall Street Journal, but now you still need to know the Wall Street Journal, need to know her Substack. And then this like third bucket is the tools and technologies to make you better at your job, because I know everyone's under pressure to make sure they're using AI and being more efficient. So I feel like this conversation is really relevant because it's not just about AI tools, it's about your full tech stack. Because as a consultant now, it's like having a full-time employee, having great tools to power my business.
So, and by the way, anyone watching, bring your questions to the comments, please. If you see me looking down, it's not me taking a nap because I have five kids. It's because I'm actually looking for your comments and bringing them into the conversation. Um, but Amanda, I'd like to start with you on the tech stack side because when I first reached out to you all, didn't even think about that. I was thinking more about processes. I was thinking more about making sure that you have your details, right? Like we're a small company of 10 people. I still do all the invoicing, right? So I have to make sure that when I'm doing the invoice, it's the right amount, sent on the right day to make sure that meets the client's need, or sending a proposal, or not missing a meeting when I was doing a handoff from myself to my colleague who's working now directly with Susan, make sure that handoff is smooth on the back end so that he's prepared to walk in the door and work with Susan. But you're talking about the tech stack. So I'd love to hear from you how that tech stack supports but can't replace good processes and good thinking.
Yeah, so I feel like if I could go back in time when I started my own company, and I went through this process with the state of New York called SEEP, which is great. It's like part of unemployment where they'll help you start a business, which I think is so smart because a lot of comms people are in that dilemma of like, do I do project work or do I collect unemployment? So I was a little more thoughtful, but I really wish I would have thought about like what tools and tech do I want? Because I feel like it's easy to fall into the trap of doing free trials for a bunch of stuff. But really
Yes.
like whoever you use for your finance software, like you need that for when you do taxes. And if I had a client overpay me once in the last year and I could go back and see it. And I looked like Dustin, to your point, like really, like I was invested in their success and I was really organized. So I feel like it's good to have a strong finance software and banking solutions. And also like I would dig into like what cut they take. Cause even as someone who
Mm.
switched as a newsletter platform from Substack to Beehive, Substack takes a big cut for your paid subscribers. And it's also funny that you mentioned this because I've one thing I've noticed is, someone who worked in financial services, there's certain companies where getting through their procurement system is like a massive badge of honor. Um,
Yes. I've experienced them.
so I feel like for Amex, like if you've gone through Amex or JP Morgan, like these vendors like joke about it. So I also, maybe this is a conversation for later in the thing. I also like have kind of use cases in my head of what to do if like someone needs to accept credit cards, which I'm able to do. But I've also I have a network of PR agencies I partner with. So if their client needs to pay me or needs to work with me, I can partner with them because starting me as a new vendor client would be tough.
I I really like that, Amanda. I mean, I think we should come back to it maybe in the last 10 minutes to talk about what is too difficult for your agency and what is not. What is too much to deal with? And I have a couple of case studies myself of where we've said we can only go this far because it's only for a small client, we can't afford to be learning 17 new technologies or whatever. Dan, you've
Yeah,
been
or doing all their compliance training and all that
right,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Dan, go ahead and jump in.
Well, actually, what's interesting? When I was doing consulting work, I had upstarts or, really, really young companies, and they would come to me and they would ask me if I was interested in taking equity instead of the monthly retainer.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, that was challenging to decide because
Mhm.
how bullish was I on these companies? Um, one of them, and this is way back when, one of them ended up selling for about $700 million. I should have taken equity and I did not. Shame on me. With a couple of the others, actually, with one of them, I did take equity. With the others, it was just monthly. It was the cash in the pocket, which I wanted, as opposed to the equity, which was a long-term risk. Um, I'm not sure if you guys have ever experienced that. And even on the agency side, quite honestly, um, way back when I was at an agency in the greater Boston area, and this was at a time when these companies were offering equity in lieu of a decreased retainer. And I wasn't the one who was deciding that. It was the CEO. But I am curious to know if he and his partners ever did that. Uh, you know, on my side, when it comes to things like invoices, etc., I always say to my agencies, please just get them to me at the start of the month because I
Right.
want to pay you. Having been on the agency side and on the consulting side, I want that money over to them as soon as possible. I don't want them to wait. And the fact that I've had to proactively go to agencies weeks into the month and say, hey, please send us your invoice because
Really?
I want to pay. Yeah, I want to get that over with. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a contract. And the sooner that I can get that invoice processed, the better for my finance team as well. They're dealing with a ton of stuff. And if the agency is going to send me an invoice, I don't know how many days there are in April, 30, 31. I
30.
don't know, someone can tell me. But I don't want it on the last day because then it's going to take time and it could aggravate my finance people. So it's get it to me week one. And I don't know. I don't know if other clients work that way, but I want my agency partners to get paid. So in a timely fashion.
So when I started my company, it was right before my first kid was born. I was out of work. My business partner is a five-time entrepreneur. He started two multi-million dollar companies. And my invoicing at the time was an email or held in my memory. And he said, and I listened to him, not just because he's dad in my household or grandpa to some people in my household, but also because he's done five companies, he said, no, we're going to do an invoicing system. You're going to have an accounting system. You're going to have all of this stuff recorded. So you don't, to your point, Dan, miss sending an invoice. And in fact, one time I did deposit a check and I didn't record it over here. It was a $4,000 check.
Hmm.
And the only reason I went back and realized it, to your point, Amanda, is the accounting system we had set up and the invoicing system we had set up had backups in it. And it wasn't that complicated. It seemed complicated at the time. But he said, trust me, give it 6 months. And suddenly there was that backup that caught the $4,000 deposit that I didn't put into revenue received. And that could have created an issue. Was what if I reached out to the client and said, hey, you didn't pay me? Because when mistakes happen, but the fewer mistakes that can happen, the more you have that good relationship. So, Susan, if I want to ask you as somebody who goes to finance and says, hey, my PR, this hasn't happened, but my PR partner said we didn't pay them. How much, for a larger company, maybe that's just a quick check of their system. For you, how much does that hurt the relationship and the probability of long-term success because of working with a family-owned business that's in that first investment of PR?
So how much does it hurt the relationship with the vendor?
And
Or
with the people you report to
so,
whomever.
from the customer perspective, and I'm glad to have Amanda and Dan here from a different angle. From a customer perspective, I don't care what tech you're running. I don't care what your problems are. I don't care what your invoicing system is. No, honestly, I mean, from a customer perspective,
Right.
we talk up front about, you're going to send me an invoice, and here are the payment options that our accounting office allows. So we did the like ACH, right? So we're going to
Right.
establish you as a vendor in our system. So I knew what that took, and I knew the steps, and vendors come right along with me to give us a copy of your W-9. If there is a missed payment, what the advantage is from where I am is it's a small family-owned company, so I have a relationship with the accounts payable folks. I can
Right.
actually literally walk over there and go, okay, this is probably my miss, but we have not paid our PR agency. How can I help you to make sure and they'll ask, is there a 30, 60, 90 days? Oh, most of the time they'll be, oh, it'll be in the next run. Okay, great. I just want to be able to go back to them and tell them when to expect payment. Um, but the vendors that have their ducks all lined up first, those we just really don't worry about because I get it in email, I forward it along to, accounts payable, and they get the payment out the door.
Amanda, I'd love your take on the tech side. One of my operations director is always telling me to use more tech. And I'm a little resistant to it because I want to make sure that my brain isn't being replaced by tech as I run the company. But I'd be very interested in the efficiencies you've seen by, for example, I still do manual invoices, but I'm going to make the switch this year to HubSpot, which is where our sales side is, but it's also where
Oh.
on the invoicing side. How much brain how much stress remove have you seen by using tech? And how have you kept your brain engaged on those processes to make sure you're not just letting the tech run everything? Because I think a lot of small agencies rely on tech rather than their own brain and processes.
Yeah. So having like a more tech forward platform for like contracts and invoices and stuff, I feel like what is helpful is you have that record. But even like, I know it sounds silly, but having like a mobile app version, because there has been times where I do a lot of live events. And so, and then the client at the last minute was like, we want to do the, pizza thing as a surprise and delight. And you're like, you don't want to like wait till after it happens to send them the invoice. So it is helpful to on my phone to be able to send invoices or check stuff. Cause I do feel like we're often like running around and I don't have an assistant to go,
Right.
um, like go look it up. So I do think having stuff that's more tech forward is helpful. The one thing I would caution folks is do a little test run, because like to your point, Dustin, like once you start making that record, you're not going to want to switch. And that's why these companies are like so successful. Like they're going to continue to take your money if all your data is in there. So I would kind of not think of like, oh, I'm going to try this for like 30 days and then see how it goes. Like, try it, and then you're going to want to stick to it because it has all your data. The one thing I'm still trying to wrap my head around is I want to make it convenient for my clients. And I feel like a lot of them are in bill.com or Mercury and things. So I have to like create these other accounts for that,
Yeah.
which I do just because I want to make their lives easier. But I still try to keep a record, or I do keep a record of my main system.
Dan, when you're working with agencies, you've talked before about how there seems to be a trend that you support of I forget the language you said in your email as we were prepping for this call, so I don't want to get it wrong. That do you think you see a lot of trend toward working with multiple smaller agencies, not one large agency when in the corporate world? How important are having their ducks in a row for those small agencies, not just for you, but also if you're recommending to your C-suite, I recommend this small agency you've never heard of, but please trust me. How important are those processes to getting to the
Yeah.
door?
I mean, really, so we're dealing with this now. So I have a few agencies in different geographies. Um, we're a Google organization. So, I, similar to Amanda using a fax and me having used phone to call, I was Microsoft. I was Microsoft, and I love Microsoft. I might be the only one who does, and that's fine. Um, I'm not a Google fan. I've never been, even though, I was an OG with Gmail. Um, and so I just want to make sure that the agencies we're working with, our partners, as I could call them, um, are using the systems that we're running on, because that helps me out from an expediting perspective. It also makes sure that there's collaboration among the agencies if you have, three or more agencies. I do, because they are disparate. They're not related. They're not partner agencies. I want to make sure that they're communicating with each other, that we're all communicating together. We also are a Slack organization. And so it's important to have Slack and have the different agency teams on that Slack. It could be like a rapid response or something like that, because it means that with an agency that's in Singapore, that's either 12 or 13 hours ahead of me, um, I can work with them different times. I can work with the US agency different times, with the European agency different times, because we're talking about a very wide gap, and stories that are going to be specific to different regions, or they're just going to be global. As long as there's communication among everyone, and it's not just, among the agency partners and me, it's also among my constituents in-house who are the regional marketing leaders in APAC, in EMEA, Americas, etc. So we just need to make sure that everyone is linked together, because email doesn't cut it at all, and things get lost in email. Um, I've embraced Slack recently. Once again, I was a Microsoft person. I was a Luddite, still kind of am. But I definitely appreciate tools, applications like Slack, for that purpose. If I had one agency, it would be less important, but with multiple, it's critical. Um, and I have worked with bigger agencies that have their offices in many, many different cities. That's worked as well. But quite honestly, I don't see any issue, any downside to working with these smaller boutique shops as long as everyone is running on the same systems.
So let's talk about the ones that are headaches, right? Missed things, things that are, oh, that was annoying, but that's okay. Versus, boy, that's a red flag for me to work with that, that agency. Because again, on the back end, it's running a small agency, is you talked about cash flow earlier, Dan, who hinted at cash flow. We try to make sure we have plenty of savings. So if a client is late on a payment or there's some kind of miscommunication, we're not desperate. We don't have to hassle the client a week later. We can let it sit and it's no problem from the next check run. Or HH deposit or any number of other ways. Amanda, you said you use credit cards. We actually have never been paid by credit card, nor do we desire to. So far that hasn't been a problem. But we did have 3 clients in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, ask us to get on the Signal app with their organization. One time we said yes, 2 times we said no because they were too small for us to really have to learn this piece of tech and be constantly bombarded with messages. So I'd be very interested in each one of you explaining 1 or 2 things that a back-end process that could come into an error that would become either annoying, which is no big deal, or a red flag. Missed meetings, late invoices, anything else.
I have a really quick one, and it's like embarrassing, but I so how I have my process is I have like my finance software Bonsai, and then I use American Express. But a lot of the smaller companies I work with, whatever they set up there, and big ones, like but some of the press release companies, they were incorporated with a different name. So more often than I want to admit, I'm looking in my Bank of America and I'm like, who is this company? Because it's different than the name I know, and I have to Google and search. And I feel, I mean, maybe I need to be at the point where when I set up, I ask their finance team, like, I don't, I felt embarrassed asking this, but I feel like I want to ask them now, like, when this money hits my
Right.
account, what is it going to show up as? Because I have done projects where I have like 4 people paying $2,000. And when the $2,000 hits, I don't know where that's coming from. And it's
Right.
always harder to go back than ask at the beginning. But I feel like I'm sure there's somebody who has a way to like track when the money comes in, what invoice that hit. And I don't have that system yet. And it's been a
But I think
headache.
answer that question up front. I mean, Susan, I think you would much rather answer that question on the front end than have to go back and check with your finance team middle of the month.
Absolutely. Key to us is, well, I mean, let's face it, it's like deciding if you're going to date somebody. How much do you know about them, right? I mean, honestly, that's what your website is. Are people going to be, swiping left or swiping right, whatever it is. I
What the kids are doing these days.
happy that I don't know, but it's how much do they know about us? How much research did they do about us? How many questions did they ask about us and our competitive landscape and our business first? And then offering that, okay, ask the hard questions. What's your budget? Because that's a tough question for us being the size company we are. And then going, okay, great. So here's what we've learned about you. Here are the pain points and challenges that we've heard. Here's the budget. And trust me, budget's a pain point, right? Um, Understanding your priorities and where you sit within the competitive landscape and where you're trying to go, what your market vertical focuses are. Here's what we can bring. And that made it so much easier for me because they understand who we are. They understand what my, market vertical and my targets are. But they also understand what the budget is. So I am not expecting them to bring panacea to Interstate. I am expecting them to understand within these parameters, what can they offer? Right. And so this makes it easier for me to make a choice because they've already deigned to connect to who we are as a business and what the competitive landscape looks like. And then within that, okay, here are the budget constraints. We can do this. That was what was really critical for me to be able to make a sound choice.
And Dan, what were some of the things that were red flag process errors for you when you're working with an
So,
agency?
I mean, less red flag process, but I learned a long time ago. So the way I negotiate contracts with agencies, I give them the number and I expect that monthly invoice to be
Right.
that number. And early on, let's say the budget, I don't know, let's say it was like $15,000. And every month it was 17.5 or 18.2. It's like, all right, what is the disconnect here? And then we would talk about the disconnect. And then I stopped that. And I was like, all right, this is flat. We have this agreed upon number. If we're going to go over this number, we need to discuss in advance why. Um, and then the other item, which is related, was markup. If I was looking for the agency to do something, I would just ask them. I'd be very transparent. What is the markup that you guys charge for this? And if the markup was substantial, I would just do it on my own. I do want the agencies to do a lot of the work that I think they should do. I'd rather not have to do that. But I do want to make sure that there's transparency and understanding on both sides with regard to the amount. And initially, and when I first started in-house, I was perplexed. And I know that agencies overserve, and I know that agencies do some other things, a lot of other things. But I have to make sure from a finance perspective, from a budget perspective, as this rolls up to my boss's boss, et cetera, that the numbers stay flat. And if there's an increase, we agree on that increase. So that's really it. I mean, there are lots of red flags, but they're not really related to the back end. I mean, I can talk about, the biggest red flag that I see if we want to talk about it now, or if we want to kind of table
No,
that.
I want to hear it.
Yeah, me too.
I feel
Well,
like
I
this
mean,
is my version of Real Housewives. I want to hear
all right.
it.
Well, and it's, there's Real Housewives of Rhode Island, which is down the road from where I live. It's very exciting stuff. Um, but the biggest red flags for me, and it really comes down to the pitch process. So I always want to have three agencies participate in a pitch. And, you know, I mean, I've been in the industry for a very long time. I know most of the agencies either directly or through others. Uh, and I tell them at the onset of the pre-pitch, I just say, all right, this is what I expect. I expect everyone who you guys are planning to put on the account on the call. I expect everyone to speak, and I just tell them, and you can. I mean, I could certainly put you in touch with people I know who run agencies, and I tell them that anyone who's an SVP, an EVP, an MD, et cetera, a principal, other than doing the initial intros, I don't want them to speak during the pitch at all. Everyone else has to speak. They have to present. I don't expect an AC to talk about competitive landscape, but I do
Right.
want the AC to talk about some things that are salient. But everyone on the team has to participate in the pitch in some capacity because it's not just me who's going to be on the pitch. It's going to be CMO, it's going to be president, it's going to be others. And if they can't do that, I immediately strike them from the uh, from the next uh, from the next step,
Yeah,
essentially.
that's really smart. There's a agency, I'm gonna keep it like anonymous, but like an agency in New York that won like a big account and they didn't have it staffed. And so they hired a bunch of contractors because you guys know, like in this day
Yeah.
and age, there's a lot
Yep.
of solopreneurs that are like amazing. But then my friend, and this is like one of the biggest tech companies that is their client. But then my friend who's a contractor through the agency, she says it's really awkward because like they work with a lot of most people don't know that she's not she has the agency email but she's not like a full-time employee, and the the way that the way the client operates is, stuff happens at night and she's like, I'm not an employee. So I do
Right.
think that that's smart because I feel like if they haven't thought about staffing, um and they were planning to just have the people pitch and then different staff, like that's something like you'd want to know up front.
Well,
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt, Dustin, but one thing related to that, the pitches are typically 1 to 2 weeks before I say to them, I say to the team that's won, it's like, all right, you've won, confirming this is still the team. There has been an incident where the team that did pitch, they ended up putting a different team together, and I was beyond livid. So that the bait and
Did
switch is really, really bad form.
yeah.
Did they manage up to you and they were like, hey, we actually had more time? Like, or did they just think it would slide
They
through?
no, so it was a little bit of both, and I don't really have a poker face, and I get very passive aggressive, and so when this happened, they could tell. And so they did reach out, and it was still because it put me in a precarious spot. Obviously, I'm reporting up to others, and they're making sure that because I'm telling them my thought process, this is how the pitch is going to go, and this is the team, and this is the team that's going to stay there. And I do let everyone know that there's attrition. There's attrition everywhere, certainly on the agency side. And it's not just attrition with people coming and going, it's people being promoted and being moved into other clients. And so, I've been transparent in that front, but yeah, the bait and switch is
you can tell them, Dan, this isn't Timu, okay? What you see is supposed to be what you get. You're not.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly.
It's
But the one thing is, I mean, 6 months after the start of an engagement, you could have a slightly different team. In fact, I mean, depending on how many team members there are, if there are 3, 4 people in 6 months, you could have two new faces. It's really, really possible for that to happen on the agency side, certainly considering the different agencies out there. And that's just the reality of how difficult it is on the agency side. And so I do want to cut them slack. I just don't want the bait and switch immediately. But if there are changes, and sometimes the changes are actually because I'm the one who is proposing them, suggesting that this day to day isn't really as proactive as she or they should be. And then they make a move. But, I don't want to make that decision until there's already some level of comfort. Yeah, bait and switch at the onset, bad. Movement during, fine.
We have actually gone through that process internally because we've doubled the size of our team in the last year. And in fact, Susan was one of our experiment clients. She didn't know at the time, but we were making the transition from me leading all of our clients to other people beginning to lead them. And Robert has run a national nonprofit. He's perfectly qualified. But in making that transition, I had done a couple of small projects with Susan before they signed the first longer contract with us. And I thought, I really hope Susan doesn't think that I'm just handing her off to some low-level person. So we actually did an introductory call with her to Robert. I was on, I think, the next 3 check-in calls and was part of the email chains for the next 60 days to make sure that that handoff was done properly. More recently, we sat down with a prospect. I worked with them when I was a one-person show 6 years ago. They came back and said, we want you to come talk to us. We remember you. We trust you. We want you to come in person. My first in-person pitch in like 7 years. So I went in, but I made sure that our one of our content team members was with me. So they would just be looking at me the whole time and thinking, Dustin's going to be running the show. So I had my colleague sitting next to me, and then our actual client lead called in on Teams, which they were fine with, to make sure that, yes, I'm the lead salesperson. I'm the face. I'm the one they remember. But I wanted them to know I'm not the only person on the team anymore. And that was, I think, a really important part of making sure that when they sign the contract, hopefully next week, that they know that I'm involved, but I'm not going to be the only person. I'm not even going to be the primary person with whom they interact. All right, I want to bring a question here from Brady Larkin. What are best practices for agencies and consultants to address potential that you see for clients to involve extra services and fees? How to effectively pitch add-ons so the contract will be good to the client? So I'm going to answer it first and let everyone else respond too. We have lot of our contracts with our clients are month to month or gap filling. So, hey, we're going to do this thing for 6 weeks. Hey, we saw something that could add value. And so we will always communicate that and say, this is what we see. We call it a mission, goal, strategy, tactics approach. This is what helped achieve your mission, achieve the goal for the campaign. It helps the strategy in this way, and this is how it can be implemented. This is the cost. Do you want to say yes or no? And that way we're being very transparent, but we're also giving the client all the information they need to make that call either way. And at least half the time the client says yes, because we have set it up in a way that's very transparent ahead of time, and also give them the chance to say no with minimal effort. So Susan, if you want to kick this off, and then we'll go Susan, Amanda, Dan, be interested in your answer to Brady's question.
One of the things that I appreciate most, what I heard you say resonates with us as mission, goal, strategy, tactics is, okay, we've gotten to know you. Here's the contract, but here's part of your mission that we know is critical to your C-suite. And we believe that this effort addresses that directly, but there is an additional cost. Can you move money around the marketing budget to accommodate it? Is it a priority? And that understanding and asking if it's a priority, and connecting to us up front is fantastic. And honestly, I have robbed Peter to pay Paul in the marketing budget because it's going to produce the immediate results that we need, whether it's brand exposure or lead generation. It's going to produce those results that we need. And so I'm not gonna run like, Oliver with my hat in my hand asking for more money. I'm gonna move stuff around to prioritize, because I have my finger on the pulse of what the C-suite priorities are. And if this fits that, then well done. You know our strategy, you know what we're going after, you've pitched it well. I can, have the freedom of movement to move that money around and make that happen. And I don't know, Dustin, if I have, but I don't think I've said no yet. And I actually brought one to you that I paid for outside, but you guys drove all the activity, and that was the Freight Waves podcast. I
That's
was
true.
just, yeah, I was like, okay, Freight Waves is asking for this amount of money. I'm going to move money around and pay them, but you all are going to do the content and work with our internal thought leaders on
That's
getting
right.
them out. And you guys took it and ran with it. So we
Yeah.
will make that happen if we're focused on the mission.
Amanda, how to Brady's question about being able to say, here's an add-on that's going to cost something. What's your process in order to be transparent to avoid the kind of frustration Dan was talking about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I more have examples from the client side,
Mhm.
but I have both. Okay, so on the client side, when I worked at PayPal, the thing that was like very interesting to me is, I was working in San Jose, Silicon Valley, but I would go to New York every month because and then I moved to New York, their intermediate program. And oftentimes, it was a big account. So we would get staff from but sometimes we get staff from like a big group of like Seattle or Portland. And I'm like, that's weird because I'd rather have experience to meet them in person, be able to, if we're collaborating on something and we're going to go meet with our beat reporter, like I'd like you to bring you along.
Mhm.
So I do think one of the learnings for me is like managing up like where people are staffed, because it is weird if you don't have someone in the main hubs. And it's actually been interesting to me. Now I work a lot of times, I'm like fractional with these big AI companies, and then they're going to need an agency. And it's funny when they say to me, I want a San Francisco agency. So I feel like my learning for that is these companies need to just like manage up of like, we know the Bay Area.
Right.
But I think one thing I struggled with is I'm like you, Dustin, where I love like the industry and I love to go to events. So a lot of times I would invite our agency to when we would have like a press party, but it wasn't part of their scope. Like they weren't working on it. They were just
Mhm.
attending. And then one time they went over budget with Ubers to get to the event. And it was just like annoying for me because I was like, this event is literally in Chelsea, Manhattan. Like you could walk from your office. Like, why are we getting Ubers? It's not like
Right.
you were working till late into the night. So I do think that managing up, because even if you think it's like Ubers and stuff, the fact that we went over budget and I had to like increase the scope was annoying. But for me, my current role, how I position add-ons, there's a company right now and we're talking about doing a retainer. and then I have a couple events coming up that I'm telling them they should collaborate on or sponsor, is I tell them you need to build reputation capital. Like, people don't know about your brand, so you need to like have a presence. And I like tell them that this is like separate because it's content or a live event. And I try to like not have them think that the retainer includes things that
Oh, that's
are,
good.
yeah, like that they're just allowed to be part of. Like Meredith Klein, if for anyone in San Francisco, we're hosting an event April 30th, and we have a great reporter lineup in San Francisco, my hometown. And there's like a clients of mine I'm telling, should come or sponsor and things. And that's separate than my retainer work.
So we have to hop in just a minute. So Dan, I want you to close out. It sounds like Amanda's talking about the separation between the retainer and the service and additional value add things that are likely to come down the pike.
So I encourage agencies to upsell. I either
Okay.
say yes or no, or others within the org say yes or no. And I mean, as recently as this quarter, I proposed to the agencies that we look at omnibus surveys that they would drive through their research partners, and that would be an added cost because that's certainly very valuable. And so we're looking into things like that. There are
Yep.
other kinds of sponsorships that we want them to do. I mean, to Amanda's point, I mean, there are situations in which I think agency representation to complement the team at an event that has a large press well, not really an analyst presence, but a press presence could be helpful. So certainly I can justify the cost there. I would go out of my mind if I had an event in New York and the agency was in New York and they took Ubers and they didn't
Oh,
walk or they didn't take the subway or they didn't take the bus, because I learned this years ago. My CEO at a company called ACI, we had lots of events in New York, and I'm with my CEO, who at the time was probably his mid 60s, a very large man, and it was ridiculously hot. And we had to get from one press outlet to another. And I was like, let's just take an Uber. He's like, and he yelled at me. He yelled at me in a fatherly way, but he was disappointed. And he's like, no, we're going to take the subway.
right.
And so we got on the subway, and we're in suits because I mean, it was so rich. I mean, we were dealing with people who required suits, and I hate wearing suits, as you know, hence hats all the time. But he's like, no, we're going to take the subway. It's much faster, it's much easier, and why would you spend money on an Uber? So when Amanda said that, I started chuckling because I was thinking back to that event. So I want agency partners to come to me with upsell opportunities for them. The worst that I say is no. The best I say is yes. They should. They should not feel apprehensive. Although, if it's, I'm going to use a Yiddish term, which I use all the time. If it's mashugana, then I don't want
Right.
them to bring it to my attention, because I'll just be like, all right, obviously you guys have no idea what we want.
Right.
But if it makes sense and if it could help out from an exposure and an awareness perspective, absolutely, they should bring it to me. Um, and they don't need to be so detailed. I don't need an opus. It's like, hey, this is what we should do, or what we should consider doing. It's like year nay, it's as easy as that. Hopefully other clients are like that. I hope so. I can't
More
speak for them.
so we're constantly upselling. And
Yeah.
the way we do it is I always felt guilty for a while because selling, has this bad terminology, the insurance salesman or whatever. But what I learned was a huge percentage of our business last year. I mean, we grew, as I've said on LinkedIn before, we grew 75% last year. And I got to say, at least 15% of that was upsell, was saying, oh, one client in particular said, we don't have any budget for this month on this project. And I said, okay. Saw something in the news and said, hey, what if we took this news hook, made it this way, we can target here and here? And they said, yes. We ended up getting a Fox News op-ed because they said yes to that opportunity. So I think it is, to your point, Dan and Amanda, making sure you upsell, you present the value to create the upsell, not look at it as an upsell. Like if you're paying an agency 15K a month and they're saying $100 in Uber costs, that's ridiculous.
But if as a client, if an agency rep came to me and said, "Look, total transparency, this is totally an upsell for us, but the only reason I'm talking to you about it right now and taking your time up is because here's the value." That
Right.
I would totally love that. You're being completely transparent. And like you said, Dan, the worst I can do is say no, but I'm not going to divorce you.
Yeah.
You love your dating your relationship analogies. Dan, you said you had to jump, so
Yeah,
I
I mean,
want
I'm
to.
good for I'm good for 3 minutes and then I gotta jump.
So let's jump into Amanda's tech stack a little bit. Let's close it out because one of the first time I ever ran into this problem of a tech stack when working with a client was in 2022. It was actually a significant contract for us at the time as I think a 2 or 3 person agency. It was 4,500. We got it up to six per month. They were with us for 8 months, and we had to do I think 7 pieces of technology. Use their email, use their Slack or their Teams, get the Microsoft Authenticator app, and 4 others. And at some point, I just said to the guy, I'm like, look, we love doing the business with you, but we can't learn. And 7 pieces of technology is a lot for a client that's 6,000 a month. And more recently, we've had 2 clients that have pushed us to have this massive, get involved with our 15 other contractors. We've said, okay, but let's set some metrics as to time when it's most appropriate for that. So we're not getting bombarded early before we're even needed to engage. So we've actually pushed back on that in the last 6 months with 2 different clients. And that's been kind of well received because we're setting that standard early.
Yeah, my one, and I don't know if because your firm is bigger than mine, so I don't know if this would help. But one thing I've deployed a handful of times now, is when like somebody wants to meet with me, I explain to them that communications pros are not that competitive. Like there's a lot of work to go around and we like to
Yeah.
partner because like my skill set is very, like I worked on the South by Southwest launch and they hired an agency and me. And the thing is, I'm a more traditional publicist. Like a lot of the work I get is you're coming to New York, you want to set
Right.
up really good meetings. You want to, or, you're getting your CEO to come out there and you want to make sure that when they're on Squawk Box, the producer and they reduce, go over the topic. So a lot of times, like you actually, if you're in a time crunch, you want to do it right, you're going to want a couple different skill sets. So when
Sure.
I've run into that situation where they're like, we can't, like if we were to put you in the procurement system, we don't know if you would get through. I tell them, hey, let me introduce me to your agency. Let's talk. And a lot of times I'll partner with the agency. So I do think my learning for that is a lot of people who aren't PR practitioners and know they need to hire PR skills. They think we're going to be super competitive when really it's like, I'm down to, to partner. And then that way that if they can't onboard me or there's a tech issue, it won't be,
That's really
I can
smart.
just go through a partner.
Right. You can make that a little bit of the partner's headache, but they're used to it, whereas the client doesn't have to worry about it operationally.
Yeah. And now they're like connecting me. Like there's this law firm. I know a lot of comms people have this trick, like where their VCs are like, oh, this person's good at healthcare. Like now law firms and things like there's
Right.
certain partners that businesses need, like they have to have a law firm, but the law firm will partner with me and things. So it's great. You get to like, what you realize is these people end up being your advocates.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to
Well,
wrap it up, I think. So, Amanda,
yeah.
thank you.
Well,
I was super
thank
excited,
you
like
so
you
much,
said.
Dustin.
Yeah.
I love geeking out over these sorts of topics because I feel like if I
Okay,
explain
fine.
this to my husband, like I was on a Zoom and we were talking about like technology for comms for us, he'd be like, okay. But
Yeah.
actually comms people, this can make or break your business. We love it's so fun
Uh,
to geek out.
You're absolutely right. And I'm really glad. I wasn't sure where the conversation would go on red flags. So, Dan, I'm really glad you dialed into, that transparency side, because I think that's really, really key is people forgive a lot until you're trying to take advantage of their dollars, especially when they have to report back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there are no red flags, hopefully the agency and the client have a blissful relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Love it. Well, everyone have a great weekend.
Yes,
Thanks,
you too.
Dustin.
See you
Take care,
guys.
folks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dustin,
Bye.
for putting it together.